Hello, this is Kinninigan from RagingReptilian.com. We're going to have a little rant about theology. As most people know, I was born Irish Catholic. I am Irish Catholic, and really upsets me when I see people questioning my religion. I don't break the Ten Commandments on a daily basis. My relationship with Jesus and God is between us, regardless of what other people may think. I'm also going to defend, of all people, the Jews in this video, so if that gets your blood boiling, because after all the years of research I have done, I find that when you touch these subjects, it's walking on eggshells. I made the video yesterday about King Tut and mentioned that he was the son of Akhenaten, also known as Moses. Moses' wife was Nefertiti, who was also the queen of Sheba. I'm going to give you links and sources in this video that are solid. Links that you just can't get out of anywhere. One is from the Masons themselves, or specifically from a Rosicrucian. The second one was a documentary I uploaded to my YouTube channel about Babylonian Talmud, and this is where I will defend the Jews. Not all Jews follow Babylonian Talmud, and not all Jews are Zionists. In fact, there's a very big movement in Israel of Jews that are against Zionism. They might follow the Torah, specifically the Old Testament, because that's what we're going to be talking about. I made a mention about the merger and where my research is going from Babylon. We had 4 ancient civilizations that come and get merged together in the Old Testament, and I'm going to show you proof for all of them. We have Egypt, Babylon, Greece, and Rome. And they're all connected. And some of the mythology has been twisted in the Old Testament. What is in the Bible? If you're not aware of the Council of Nicaea, that is the people who edited the Bible. But I'm also going to defend Moses to a degree, because I believe part of the reason Akhenaten, the story of Exodus, for example, I'm going to show you something that I did in the documentary. You've seen a lot of stories on Exodus, correct? And we're talking about Moses here. You're familiar with Moses parting the Red Sea. You're familiar with Moses receiving the 10 Commandments from God, and you're familiar with the burning bush. But how many people know that in the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, there's a story of the Bronze Serpent, which is a direct reference to the Sumerian god Enki. This same Bronze Serpent would be adopted by the Greeks, what is known as the Cardaceus, that is the medical staff with the intertwined serpents around it. Now that is the statue of Moses from Michelangelo, of all people, going back to the Vatican. And the Rosicrucians are a secret Luciferian society inside the Vatican. No surprise there. Yes, and Moses was depicted as having horns. They say it was a symbol of wisdom. However, this idea of Moses being Akhenaten was first brought up by, of all people, before you jump the gun here, Sigmund Freud. Does anyone know who Sigmund Freud was? He lived from 1856, died in 1939. He is the godfather of psychiatry. And yes, it was Sigmund Freud. Now, there's a lot of reading here. If you want to come to these links and read them, I'm not going to be doing any reading in this video. I am going to show you some media clips, though. Sigmund Freud was the first to argue that Moses was in fact Egyptian. Now, I'll go to this link, and this was a book actually written by Sigmund Freud called Moses and Monotheism. Monotheism is the worship of one God. Now, what's very strange is we have such Egyptian pharaohs known as like Thutmoses. So Moses is actually an Egyptian name. But I have a belief that there was some kind of divine intervention going on here, and kind of a war with the real God and the reptilian or the serpent gods, and a lot of the mythology got intertwined together. What has made me such a great researcher over the years, I'm not a gatekeeper, I'm not controlled, I'm not a Mason, I don't work for the CIA, and I'm not a shill. And if anyone thinks that after what I'm about to show you, I don't know what to tell you, because Masons aren't allowed to divulge their own secrets, first of all. Either are Rosicrucians. Secondly, The reason why Akhenaten leaves Egypt and he wants to found monotheism, I believe he actually was talked to by the real God. And there is some truth to this. And I believe the story of the Bronze Serpent that comes in was the reptilians trying to steer Moses away from becoming monotheistic, which would eventually become the roots of Judaism. Now, that is not the Babylonian Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud comes from the 72 Pharisees of Babylon, the Anunnaki and the Gigi gods, in which they actually denounce Christ. I'm going to show you some of these clips. It gets pretty interesting. So what are my sources for this? Well, I've known, let's go back here. Yeah, now this website I'm at, this is Graham Hancock. I like a lot of research from Graham Hancock, but he did not write this article. He posted it on his website. This is written by a gentleman called Ahmed Osman, who is also making the case that, yes, Moses was the Pharaoh Akhenaten. The Bible and the Quran speak of Moses being born in Egypt, brought up in a pharaonic royal palace, and leading the Israelites in their exodus to Canaan. In historical terms, when did Moses live, and who was the Pharaoh of oppression? Now, I'm going to say this to defend myself, and this is actually a quote that comes from Jordan Maxwell, of all people. He said, "I'm looking for the truth, and I don't care who I offend, why I do it." And that's the way I look at my research. Putting together all these civilizations in conjunction with Judaism and theology is like walking on eggshells with a lot of people, because two things I was taught when I went into working in the restaurant industry. In between the time I was a salesman and a debt collector in University City, I was told, never talk about politics or religion in front of people because you never know who you're going to offend. And that's good advice for a bartender. Damn good advice, actually. And that's what would make you a good bartender, is not getting involved in religion and politics. But unfortunately, in my line of work, you always have to talk about religion and politics. So Sigmund Freud was the first one to bring this idea up of Moses being Akhenaten. Okay? And there's been a lot of things to back this up. Now, the Queen of Sheba. Why is she so revered by the Masons? This is a document. This is called Freemasonry and Catholicism. As soon as my PDF viewer. Give you a little background on Max Heindel here. Max Heindel is a Rosicrucian. That is the secret society within the Vatican. And Max Heindel divulged some of the secrets of Masonry that he had learned. I know, I butcher the word Masonry. You think I care if I pronounce that right or not? These people. Like, for example, you'll hear, now he was a Rosicrucian of the Rose Cross to be Temple of the Rose Cross. Yes, they are. Now, the Rosicrucians are in a higher pecking order than the Masons are. And they're directly connected to the Vatican, the gatekeepers of theology and all this. A lot of people are familiar with the Vatican Library or the Vatican Archives, which most of us are not allowed to see. That's because a lot of this hidden secrets are kept there. Now, for example, you scroll through the different chapters here. Masons. Oh, we don't worship Lucifer. What's the first chapter that Max Heindel writes here? Lucifer, the rebel angel. This is also the book that I learned that Freemason actually stands for Freemason, which stands for Child of Light or Child of Lucifer. Part 2, the Masonic legend, deals with Hiram Abiff. And Part 3, the Queen of Sheba. Why is the Queen of Sheba so revered? She was one of the few ancient queens. She was also the Queen of Egypt and Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia has very strong roots with Catholicism. Jesus, specifically, and the Order of the Nazarene, who built churches to hide from Rome after the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I'm going to make a video in the future about Jesus, the Church of Petra, and the Order of the Nazarene. So if anyone wants to question my religion, please don't, because I happen to have quite an insight on this. And what we get in the Old Testament is the merging of a lot of different mythologies. And you have the 7 days of creation from God. We have the 7 tablets of creation that come right from Sumeria. That's not a coincidence. We also have, infamously in the Old Testament, the Nephilim. People have heard of the Nephilim. or the fallen angels, the Illuminati, the reptilians that are actually in control. So, if you really want to find out some of the secrets of the Masons, including what is in the Ark of the Covenant, it's Aaron's rod, the rose disc, and the 72-syllable lost word of God. This will also tell you the symbol of the rose. It deals with spiritual alchemy, the Philosopher's Stone, the path of initiation, Armageddon. This was predicted by 33-degree Mason Albert Pike, the Great War and the Coming Age, in which they will unite the whole entire world under the doctrine of Lucifer. But this all ties back to a gentleman called King Solomon. And this is why the Queen of Sheba is so revered. She actually met with Solomon in his court. And yes, she was the wife of Akhenaten or Moses. Now, like I said, there are things that you can verify that I'm going to say here that are right in the Old Testament of the Bible. I have a Catholic Bible. It contains both the New and Old Testaments. Okay? Then, I'm not going to argue with people about this. You have the King James Version. King James was a Freemason. And there is a Masonic Bible out there that parallels the New Testament, except it's a little different, and it's tied in with a lot of Egyptology, including at the ending of prayers, the infamous Amun-Ra. That's a fact. So this is where I got a lot of my insight into the Masons from a Rosicrucian who wrote a book divulging. This book was written in the early 19th century. But they never actually say that the Queen of Sheba is Nefertiti, although we know it is. So let's talk about Exodus of all things. And then I'm going to show you a few things here. Now, if you don't know the difference between the real Jews and the Zionists, there's a huge difference. Let me just use a modern example. You say American nowadays, but are you talking about the normal conservative Americans like us who love our president and want to see our constitutional rights not be invaded? Or do you identify with the far left who wants to destroy that and turn us into a fascist socialist country who don't like our president, who hate everything that is American? So it's kind of the same parallels within Israel itself. You have hardcore Zionists that follow Babylonian Talmud, and you have other Jews, that even some Jews, and it's covered up by Israel because, yes, there is a rebellion against Zionism in Israel, because they actually believe that the Jews should never have set up Israel, and they should still be wandering the earth until the return of Messiah. Now, it was the 72 Pharisees from Babylon that condemned Jesus Christ to be crucified. And that was done by the Romans, infamously Pontius Pilate, who washed his hands of that. But the events we're talking about here happened before the coming of Jesus. We're talking about events in the Old Testament. Now, for anyone that is been following my channel, this was a video that I was able to salvage from my old channel. I'm going to play the first 5 minutes here because it's going to be a little story. Now this was, I called it a documentary, but this 40-minute video took me about 2 days to make because I used so much media in the video. It's all scored to music, and I would like to get back to doing videos like this. They take time, but this will give you a little bit of insight of one story from the Old Testament that is conveniently not talked about because it basically proves serpent worship, and it has links to the Sumerian god Enki of all people. And you'll get the roots of where the Cardaceus comes from. This ties in with the Greeks also because you got to remember our Bible was translated from Koine Greek. And the theory I'm coming at with this is that Babylon falls, Egypt falls. Ironically, they're conquered by a Greek, Alexander the Great. He ties into this story actually. I'm going to make a video about Alexander the Great. I think a lot of what we're hearing about what he does with the knocking down the Tower of Babel and going all the way up into the crucifixion of Christ that happens by the Romans, and eventually what I think it was these other ancient civilizations were failing. I think, you know, they were experimenting. We had the Egyptian civilization, the Babylonian, the Roman, and the Greek all at the same time. But it kind of feels like they abandoned Babylon, they abandoned Egypt, they put paganism, and they hide it. Rome is the godfather of secret societies. One of the highest, there's an order above the Rosicrucians known as the Club of Rome. And these secret societies are all ruled by Rome. Rome is still in power. So I believe that they decided to take the Roman and Greek, because we're still under Roman civil law. You ever heard of civil court? Eventually they would make Israel, the Holy Land, the mystical capital of Rome. They would make Londonos the administrative capital of Rome. This is why we have British maritime law, and Londonos is set up on a major ley line. This is why the Romans go and slaughter Boudica and the Celtic warriors in Britannia and set up modern-day Britain, which would become the administrative arm of Rome. And what is the financial? Well, the financial one should be easy. The Pope is protected by Swiss Guard. After the Knights Templar, we're told, are disbanded, they go to Sweden and set up Swedish banking. That is Knights Templar banking. So there goes your financial branch of Rome. It's in Sweden with Swedish bankers. So you have a mystical arm, an administrative arm, and a financial arm, which is Sweden, London, and the Holy Land for the mystical. And a lot of what the Masons learn is based on Egyptian mysticism. So I'm going to play this little clip here, probably the first 5 minutes of it, and show you what I'm talking about. Just one story from the Old Testament that they conveniently leave out. How many movies have you seen about Exodus? And we know, like I said, you know about Moses parting the Red Sea, and I believe that's more metaphoric also. The burning bush and the receiving of the Ten Commandments, where Moses embraces monotheism and abandons the Egyptian pantheon of paganism. So I'm going to play this clip here. I'll put the links in the description if you want to watch this whole video. This is basically me going through a lot of different ancient serpent worship all the way from the Indus Valley to China, basically proving that a lot of these gods that we hear about in ancient mythology are the reptilians themselves. I believe the story that I'm going to show you here with the Bronze Serpent and Moses was the reptilians trying to rebel against him for exiting out of Egypt. And I believe that, yes, Moses probably was in communication with the real God, trying to steer people away, which I believe, you know, we know that. And then paganism goes underground in the form of secret societies. Now, another video, I might have, actually, no, it's on my channel, The Reptilian Roots of Freemasonry, in which I basically prove that Gilgamesh becomes Nimrod. That's a fact. And the oldest story that we have on the planet is the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I read that on my other channel. If I have to reread it, yeah, that's a little lengthy story, but it's very interesting. That's when Gilgamesh, and where you get the brethren and the brotherhood, when his Enkidu is killed, and it ties even the reptilian roots of Freemasonry shows where the brethren and the brotherhood, and even to a degree the sodomite and homosexuality aspects of the Masons comes into play. So let me play this little clip for you, and then I'm going to show you a little 2-minute clip on what the Babylonian Talmud actually writes about Jesus, okay? And I'll also give you a link where you can watch that full documentary on the Babylonian Talmud, because obviously I can't publish that on my YouTube channel. I get a lot of people coming by asking me, why don't you talk about the Jews and the Zionists? Well, you can't. Just like I can't make videos on the Nazis and their... I've been wanting to make videos about the Nazis and the Vril Society and Maria Orsic for a long time, but you can't put anything on YouTube with Nazi in it. However, the far left and the insane liberals can call us Nazis all day. You see the double standards here? And to a degree, yes, I will defend Jews because not all of them practice or read or, condone what is in the Babylonian Talmud. It is one of the most satanic and Luciferian texts that exists out there. And what do you hear what they say about Jesus? And these were the Pharisees, like I said, that condemned Jesus Christ to be crucified. It wasn't actually the Jews. The Pharisees carried an oral tradition that came out of Babylon. There were 72 of them, and we have 72 archons in the lesser key of Solomon. Again, this is revolving around Solomon, of all people. Very important. This is the foundation of the Knights Templar, or the temple. And so, I know, for some, it's like walking on eggshells when you're trying to put all this information together. Like I said, the Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba is first mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. I wanted to do this before I play the clip because you got to remember, we're talking about the Old Testament here, before the birth of Jesus. And King Solomon has undergone extensive Jewish, Islamic, and Ethiopian elaborations and even legends in the Orient, of all people, but it's always been a mystery on who the Queen of Sheba is. But you become a Mason, you'll find out, because like I showed you, it's right in their own teachings. This is why I said my sources are solid. And Nefertiti, with the elongated skull, yes, she was the mother of King Tut. Here's her without her headdress and her elongated head here. She was the wife of Moses, or Akhenaten. And I believe within some of this story, yes, there is some divine intervention from the real God, which is where you get mono. Mono means one, theism, the worship of one God, and the end of paganism. Eventually, the Vatican and Rome would hijack this under the guise of Catholicism and Christianity, although the Vatican is one of the most pagan institutions on the planet. So I don't argue about people, if you're Catholic, you're not responsible for what's going on at the Vatican. That's all I'm saying. And so, let's read about the Bronze Serpent, and let me go through a little bit of the beginning here. The Seraph of the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, explicit references to our serpent god ancestors have been all but eliminated over the centuries through a long process of selection and editing. When allusions are found in the scriptures, they are interpreted as merely allegories. There is a strange incident related to the book of Numbers concerning a bronze or brazen serpent, which raises many questions that are never fully addressed by biblical scholars. In the second year of the Exodus, after they had left the comforts of Mount Sinai and were struggling across the wasteland, the tribes had a skirmish with the king of Arad in the Negeb and prevailed after much difficulty. The incident of the brazen serpent happened then. They set out from Mount Hor by the road to the Red Sea to skirt the land of Edom. But the people grew restive on the journey, and the people spoke against the Lord and against Moses. "Why did you make us leave Egypt to die in the wilderness? There is no bread and water, and we have come to loathe this miserable food." The Lord sent seraph serpents among the people. They bit the people, and many of the Israelites died. The people came to Moses and said, "We sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Intercede with the Lord to take away the serpents from us." And Moses interceded for the people. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Make a seraph figure and mount it on a standard. And if anyone who is bitten looks at it, he shall recover." Moses made a bronze serpent and mounted it on a standard. And when anyone was bitten by a serpent, he would look at the brazen serpent and recover. It is difficult to escape the conclusion that the meaning of the incident is obviously idolatry, an activity forbidden in the scriptures. The Hebrew word seraph is an unusual one and appears only a few times in the books of the Old Testament. In Isaiah 14 and 30, the seraph is referred to as me opheth seraph, or literally meaning flying serpent, and is associated with Philistia and the Negev, lands which were traditionally the home of the descendants of the Nephilim after the deluge. The brazen serpent, which was made by Moses at God's command, was revered in the temple sanctuary until the 8th century BC, when, according to Kings 18, King Hezekiah, angry over idol worship, broke the bronze serpent that Moses had made. It is doubtful if the original seraph made by Moses about 1400 BC, and that it survived till this time. In either case, it demonstrates that the worship of serpent gods was well established among the Israelites. During the period of the Judge and Kings, it suggests that Yahweh had at least at one time been identified with the serpent god. The term seraph has worried biblical translators and commentators over the years. It is translated as fiery serpent in the King James Version. However, the modern tendency is not to translate at all, but to render the Hebrew word as given. Seraph does not fit any convenient classification or translation. It seems more probable that it is borrowed from the Canaanite word, who acquired it from their Mesopotamian heritage. The roots of the term may well be Mesopotamian. The flying or fiery serpent atop a pole, worshipped for its healing properties, symbolically represents Enki, the Sumerian god of healing, who is often associated with the snake symbol. There is also a curious resemblance of the snake wrapped around a pole with the later caduceus of the Greeks. Happy here, and I want people to understand. I hope you understand where I'm going at with this. I've got to take Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, because this bronze serpent is eventually formed into the Cardaceus, which is a symbol of the Agigi god Enki. I've made videos on the difference between the Agigi and the Anunnaki, and a lot of that stuff about the Anunnaki was muddied by none other than Freemason Zachariah Stitchin. We know that. Planet Nibiru never came. And he was trying to tell people that these Agigi gods were miners on Mars. Now, I actually have a video very interesting about Mars, specifically dealing with the Sidonia site there and its relationships to Old Egypt, or the land of Kemet, that Thoth builds. Maybe I'll make that video this week, the Mars-Egypt connection, because there is one. So, and I've also got to take, Sumerian mythology. And a lot of this makes its way into the Old Testament. And this is what I mean. I'm walking on eggshells with this. I hope people understand why this becomes very difficult for me. And I am someone who's actually researched all these mythologies. I just don't pull stuff out of the air or regurgitate what other people say. I've actually done the research. Now, the Babylonian Talmud and Zionist conspiracy. People say I don't talk about Zion. Well, I actually try to enlighten people on Zion. But my video was blocked on YouTube. This is unlisted. This is the full documentary. And even on an unlisted video, The following content has been identified by the YouTube community as inappropriate or offensive to some audiences. Now, I want to tell you something. This video was never published on YouTube for me. So the YouTube quote community never flagged this video because it was never available to the YouTube community. Which lets me know that YouTube itself are gatekeepers for this information, specifically what is in Babylonian Talmud. However, even on an unlisted video I get this morning. Now this video is 58 minutes long. It will go over everything going up to the, and it will enlighten you on the difference between real Jews and Zionists, because there's a huge difference. Now if you're interested in seeing the full documentary, it is on my Patreon, because it's an unlisted YouTube video. It is locked. You can join my Patreon for $1 a month and have access to all these locked videos, including that full documentary, The Babylonian Talmud and Zionist Conspiracy. So if there's people out there that think I don't talk about Zion, you've got it wrong, okay? And I got a few. Now, this Aleister Crowley and Thelema, that's unlocked. I actually uploaded that to YouTube and put it unlisted, and YouTube allowed me to keep it on my channel. And the only reason I'm telling you this is, it's like, how does all this other censorship happen on YouTube? Yet this lecture is perverse. It's over an hour long, and I enlighten you on Aleister Crowley and what Thelema or sex magic is, or spermognosis. As disgusting as it may sound, YouTube allowed me to publish it on my YouTube channel. So you don't actually have to join Patreon to watch that Crowley lecture, but I do have a few things on here that were blocked from YouTube, and that, you know, I put them on, and I plan to get some more content on my Patreon as Patreon only videos, maybe even including some stuff with the Vril Society and the Nazis. Because it is a fascinating subject, but I hate being told what I can't and can't talk about when it comes to this stuff. But, you know, like I said, the left can call us Nazis all day and get away with it. Now, out of curiosity, I took a 2-minute and 12-second clip out of that documentary of Babylonian Talmud, and this is what the Pharisees actually say about Jesus Christ. These are the ones who condemned him to be crucified at the cross. They are the ones that went up to Pontius Pilate and begged for his crucifixion because he was the false Messiah. It wasn't actually the Jews, it was the Pharisees, and they come from Babylon. So we have this merging of the Babylonian Pharisees, Moses or Akhenaten coming from Egypt, embracing monotheism. I believe the story of the Bronze Serpent signed to Enki was reptilian intervention there between Moses and the real God. Now what else is interesting, when you go through a lot of Egyptian pharaohs, we get some, Moses is a very common Egyptian name. Obviously we have like Moses, we have Thutmoses. This is Nefertiti right there, almost sounds like Nefertiti. Queen Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut is interesting. I'll be making a separate video about her. God's wife of Ammon. And there's a lot of similarities between even names. Like we have pharaohs called Thutmoses. And so Moses essentially is an Egyptian name. So amazingly, YouTube allowed me to publish this video, what Babylon really thinks about Jesus. And for some that don't know what's in the Talmud, this might be a little disturbing to you when you hear what they actually say about Jesus. I'm just going to play this now and let you hear this.
There is a special antagonism between the Talmud and Jesus. The Talmud attacks him everywhere it can, even his mother. Mary, the Talmud says, was a whore who mated with carpenters. She who was the descendant of princes and governors played the harlot with carpenters. It naturally followed that the scribes declared Christ to be a bastard. In its article on Jesus, the Jewish Encyclopedia says that Jewish writings defame Christ. It is the tendency of all these sources to belittle the person of Jesus by ascribing to him illegitimate birth, magic, and a shameful death. Jesus, according to this article, was considered one of the 3 worst enemies of Judaism who came to an ignoble end. The Talmud says They subjected him to 4 deaths: stoning, burning, decapitation, and strangling. The Talmud also says he is now in hell, punished with boiling hot excrement. What is Christ's advice as he speaks to us out of hell? The Jewish Encyclopedia quotes Jesus as telling us above all to bless the Jews. He says, "Further their well-being. Do nothing to their detriment. Whoever touches them touches even the apple of his eye." Christians, as followers of the false prophet Jesus, also deserve death. The Jewish Encyclopedia again recaps the Talmud's position. A Gentile observing the Sabbath deserves death. It says the Talmud's hatred was probably directed against the Christian Jews. These Judeo-Christians, evasively called min, minute, or minim, were considered by the rabbis to be the most dangerous form of heretics of ancient times. The New Testament Gospels were writings which the rabbis considered more dangerous to the unity of Judaism than those of the pagans. A Talmudic rabbi said, "The writings of Christians deserve to be burned, for paganism is less dangerous than minute or Christianity."
Going back to Egypt, with the Babylonian Talmud and the Pharisees call us Christians minute. Does that sound very familiar? This is going back to Egypt. The word hour is the Egyptian god Horus. And what is the smallest increment of an hour? Minutes. Do you understand? Well, yeah. This is some of the occult secrecy that's right in front of your face every day. It's no coincidence that we have hours in a day, which is the Egyptian god Horus, and the smallest increments of an hour are minute, which they refer to us Christians. You'll also notice in there, the Pharisees say that the teachings of Christ are a bigger threat than those of the pagans. Well, that's saying a lot now, isn't it? These were not the real Jews who wrote the Talmud. These were the Pharisees that come out of Babylon. I make a lot of jokes about Babylon all the time. Good morning, Babylon. But you don't understand the kind of evil that is involved with these reptilian gods. And like I said, I'm searching for the truth, and I don't care who I offend while I do it. And so in the coming days and weeks, I'm going to try to put together these stories of the merging of Egypt, Babylon, Greece, and Rome all together. But at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with the real Jesus, because I just showed you what the Babylonian, they knew he was the Son of God. Why do you think they defame him so much? They call his mother a whore. And in the Old Testament, yeah, the prediction of Jesus coming, it was predicted in the Old Testament in a few passages. But why do all movies about Exodus conveniently leave out the story of the Bronze Serpent? Because it makes a direct reference to Enki in ancient Samaria. And like I said, if you want to see the whole documentary on Babylonian Talmud, it's on my Patreon. $1, you can, for $1, it's, to watch that documentary for $1, you're not going to find it anywhere else. It was on YouTube. That's where I originally got it from. You might be able to find it on YouTube and watch it. Mine was, even as an unlisted video, I get that BS warning from YouTube that it broke community. It was flagged by the community when it was an unlisted video. It was only available to my Patreons. And I know my Patreons didn't flag it. So yeah, even YouTube are gatekeepers for some of this information. And like I said, I got to walk on eggshells with doing this, because there are certain things we are not allowed to talk about. But I'm not going to have anyone question my religion just because I'm seeking answers in the truth of the Bible, ancient mythology, what really happened during Exodus, who Moses was, who the Queen of Sheba was. And like I said, I do the research, and I am not a gatekeeper. I'll put all these links in the description, including, well, this one I just want to show you. This is more just showing you that Moses is a very common Egyptian name. No surprise there. So what is the truth and what really happened? They were trying to, maybe it'll make sense when I finally do the video on after what happens to Jesus after he resurrects and forms the order of the Nazarene, which are the true teachings of Jesus, simply for the fact that they are detrimental to the Vatican and Rome and all the secret societies who want to gatekeep this information. Because one of the most infamous quotes right from Jesus is he says, "I shall build my church upon a rock," meaning that God is everywhere, and you do not have to be involved in institutionalized religion to worship Jesus or God. That is detrimental to the Vatican. Look at, and in fact, I'm going to make a video in the future about the Spanish Inquisition. I made one recently about the witches. Someone asked me what is a witch, and the witch hunts in Salmon, Massachusetts, that was ritual human sacrifice, just accusing women of being witches under the guise of Christianity and burning them at the stake. The Spanish Inquisition. No human walking on earth has the authority to condemn you as being a heretic and burning you at the stake. You are judged at the gates of St. Peter when you die, and that's between you, God, and Jesus. You don't need any human walking this earth telling you that you're doing right or wrong. We do have the Ten Commandments to go by, and if you know anything about the Ten Commandments, they're more or less, they're forms or variations of theft, more or less. Stealing of a neighbor's wife, stealing of a life, and, as long as you're following the Ten Commandments, which I believe were given to Moses from the real God, then you have nothing to worry about. But I believe that there was some kind of divine intervention here with Akhenaten, and he would eventually embrace monotheism and abandoning Egyptian paganism. He was a pharaoh, but then obviously in the dragon and what I just showed you here, even the Jewish king Hezekiah breaks the bronze serpent because he blamed it on idolatry. And I believe that was intervention by Enki or the reptilians themselves, because he was in Exodus trying to break away from this Egyptian paganism. And we have a few stories coming here. Even, I'll probably start with Alexander the Great, because there's a lot of great metaphors in there, especially the conquering of Babylon, the conquering of Egypt, and then we get our Bible translated from Koine Greek. There's a lot of things going on here. So as I kind of go into this deciphering of what was really going on in ancient times, I just wanted to rant with people here and let them know where I stand and some of the research that I've actually done. I'm using sources right from Rosicrucians themselves about the secrets of Masonry, Sigmund Freud making the case that Akhenaten is Moses, and that's a pretty solid source right there, and a pretty bold statement to make from Freud at his time. Who was the Queen of Sheba? Well, and eventually it all revolves around Solomon. Solomon is highly praised by the Masons. That's where we get the Temple of Solomon from. And Solomon is also the one who puts the 72 demons in the clay jars, which what I believe is kind of symbolic of the 72 Pharisees that come from Babylon also. And no, the Pharisees are not the modern day Jews. They came from Babylon, which is where this all started. So I believe with some of the infiltration here of religious texts all around the world, there are gatekeepers known as the Illuminati themselves, or the real fallen angels. And who else would try to sway you from the real word of God and Jesus other than the reptilians themselves, who were worshipped in Samaria as living gods and in Egypt as pharaohs? Now, I don't believe that Moses had any bad intent when he did this Exodus. Like I said, I believe he was embracing monotheism. And I believe that there was some intervention here as far as the reptilians go. So where does that leave Moses in all this? Well, I know it's a very interesting thing. If Moses was reptilian, was he a rebel reptilian? It's very interesting and very complex subject matter. But I believe at the end of the day, Moses' intentions were actually good. And he was forced to make this bronze serpent by, I believe, a false god, otherwise known as the reptilians. So, we definitely have a lot of stuff shrouded in mystery here. There's some more that I go into with the Bible and the Old Testament in this video if you're interested. Basically, this is the prayer of Joseph, which backs up more of the theory that it was revolving around Enki because of the prayers of the water god that are talked about, going back to, of all things, Sumeria and Babylon. So that's my rant before I get any more into these tales of Egyptian mysticism and emerging. And I will be making quite a few videos specifically about Alexander the Great, giving you my take on that and the metaphors involved. The union of Egypt and Rome, which is through the infamous love story of the union of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Then obviously, I believe they embraced the Roman and the Greek style of civilization to take us forward, going through there. And all paganism is swept under the rug in the form of secret societies, where the pagan worship can still continue and will let most of the population believe that we are Christians, including the Rosicrucians in the Vatican themselves, who are hardcore Luciferians, and they become gatekeepers of this knowledge. Now, please remember, I am not talking about the New Testament here. I'm talking about the Old Testament. Huge difference. Jesus is not mentioned in the Old Testament. He goes by but he is mentioned by the name Emmanuel. It's going to be very important because Emmanuel is theorized to be buried in Ethiopia of all places. And that may be the final resting place of Jesus after his resurrection and he walks the earth until his return during Armageddon. And and the Queen of Sheba was the Queen of Ethiopia for a while. She was also the Queen of Egypt. So there are a lot of correlating stories kind of happening at the same time here. But I'm not going to let anyone question my real relationship with God or Jesus or my Catholicism, because I've done quite a few videos exposing the Rosicrucians, exposing the Vaticans. Aleister Crowley is a Rosicrucian. The Order of the Golden Dawn is an inner circle of the Rosicrucians. And I made a video, as I showed you, about Crowley and sex magic. That lecture is on my YouTube channel. You could search it and watch it. However, like I said, if you join my Patreon, you can see the whole one about Babylonian Talmud and Zionist conspiracy that I cannot publish on YouTube. Even though, and this is what really sickens me, nothing in that documentary is hearsay or conjecture. They are actually reading from an English translated version of the Talmud. And you heard what they said about Jesus. Give you another fact about Babylonian Talmud. It might pique your interest in wanting to watch that documentary. Talmud also condones pedophilia in children up to 3 years old, as they will not remember the experience. Now, how sick is that? Yes, the Talmud endorses pedophilia with infants up to 3 years old, as they will not remember the experience. That is absolutely disgusting. So you want to know, and I've done a video on the reptilian roots of pedophilia also. That is on my channel. And yes, all these, whether it be the Talmud, the roots of the Masons, and the roots of the Talmud, and the roots of pedophilia, they are all reptilian in nature. This is why I take this research so serious. Like I said, I'm walking on eggshells with this. A lot of people like to question my religion because I'm making these statements. Well, you got to understand, with the research I've been doing, I've been trying to decode some of these secrets and using good sources to do it, which I believe I had. So that is my rant. I don't know what I'm going to call this video. Let's talk about the reptilian roots of Judaism and Christianity. It's a good, because, and we have obvious manipulation of real history, the Bible, even the Jewish texts. There are a few different Jewish texts. There's the Torah, the Talmud. There's another one called the Sephir or something. I can't pronounce it right. It's in Hebrew. That goes into the Kabbalah. The first time that we see a representation of the Kabbalah is on an Anunnaki wall relief that comes from Sumeria. So you get the idea here. The reptilians have had an influence on every religion on this planet, whether it's Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, all people of the book, the Abrahamic religions. That was the word I was looking for. Anyway, that's going to be all for this video. If you can help me out with merchandise or through PayPal with donations or cryptocurrency, the links are in the description. Also, you can join up and become one of my Patreons. I have quite a few videos on here that I share with, for example, I have the full shooting video of that New Zealand, remember that New Zealand shooting? I got the full video on my Patreon. It's shared on my Dropbox account. That was the one, that's how we knew that was fake. Lecture on Roman bull cults. And I plan to get some more content up on my Patreon, specifically dealing with issues, topics I can't publish on YouTube, just like, and I showed you that BS warning I got on an unlisted video. It wasn't flagged by the YouTube community because they never saw it. That's how I know YouTube is full of shit. Pardon my French, right? And in case you haven't seen it, the dragon and serpent gods of ancient mythology, I go over quite a few different things, going from Hinduism to the Indus Valley. The Indus Valley is ancient Mesopotamia. China, with the dragon emperors, very interesting things. And I've been doing a lot of this research over the years and trying to make sense of it all. I even go into, I believe it's the Naga. I wanted to show the Naga last because there's something about the Naga. I've done a video on the Naga already. A lot of people think these are the reptilians in Hinduism. I don't think so. I'm going to make another video about the Naga. I believe this was referring to an aquatic race of people because they look a lot like the Rosicrucians, for example, worship a half fish, half reptilian god known as Dagon. Also, you know, it sounds a lot like the word dragon with the R missing. It's not a coincidence. Dagon is depicted as having this, he looks kind of like the Naga. And he was an aquatic god. And he is the one that is worshipped by the Rosicrucians, where we get the fish symbolism in the Vatican of all things. Why the Pope wears the fisherman's ring. The Masons worship a backwards talking reptilian deity called Yoda. And that's why Yoda was mocked in Star Wars. So if you ever found out the truth, you wouldn't believe it. They also mocked Bigfoot in Star Wars with Chewbacca. Didn't know that? And Carrie Fisher was a tranny. A lot of things going on in the original Star Wars movie. This is pre-Disney, you know. So anyway, it's kind of my rant there. I know it's a lot to take in, and I just wanted people to understand what I deal with when trying to put these lectures together. And I'm dealing with, you know, Judaism, Christianity, Babylon, Egypt, Greece, and Rome all together. And like I said, I'm looking for the truth, not just what people want to hear. Sometimes it might not be what you want to hear. But if you're offended by my research, why do you come back and watch my videos? That's why I ask a lot of trolls a lot of time. Why are you even subscribed to me? I'm not your normal researcher, because most people don't get into the amount of the occult and serpent worship and stuff that I do. And eventually all roads lead to Babylon. I know all roads lead to Rome, but actually Rome leads to Babylon also. That's why Rome adopted the eagle as their symbol, and that's why our national symbol in America today, which is the new Babylon, is the eagle. It's the closest thing to a reptilian that they could put in front of your face without admitting that we are under the rule of reptilians, or the Illuminati. So I'm going to make quite a few videos in upcoming. And I'll make a few videos on some more hardcore secret societies also that people don't hear about too much, like the Circle of Nine. That is a very, there's a pyramid as far as secret societies go. And the Masons are the most well-known one. Rosicrucians, yeah, pretty well-known also. But you have other secret societies. There are a lot of them, and they're all there for different reasons. But that's where paganism would eventually still thrive, is within these secret societies. And you learn a lot of these secrets, like I said, by joining these secret societies, such as the Queen of Sheba being Nefertiti, and Akhenaten being Moses. Very interesting things here. But at the end of the day, do not let it affect your relationship with real Jesus or real God, or if you're Jewish, the real God. because I know that there are Jews out there who don't embrace Zionism. In fact, and a lot of this anti-Zionism rhetoric is covered up in Israel by the Zionists. There's a huge difference between a Jew and a Zionist. I'm just telling you that. Anyway, any questions or comments, leave them below. And until we speak again, this is Kinninigan, and take care.